Hey all, Scott here from Art of the Genre, and I'm going to do a little tutorial here today. For the first time ever, I'm doing a live stream on my YouTube. This is for my new RPG, that's the Fast Core system. And hopefully some people will come by. I have no idea. This is kind of tests. It's my first time I've ever done a live stream. I'm also using some program which allows me to share the screen, so I don't know really what the heck I'm doing. But I'm going to give it my best shot as an old 50-year-old designer to use some software and also take you through character creation in the FAST system. I do have the chat up, so hopefully that works. People can ask me questions if they have any, but nevertheless, that's what this is. So I'm going to try to share some screens here as I can, and I will go over character creation for the FAST system, as well as a little bit of the stuff, the history of it, and just the kind of the creation of chapter 1 as well. So let's get into it. I'm going to try to share the screen here, and we're going to go over a little bit of the PDF on character creation. So let's take a look. Okay, so yep, this seems to be working here. So we've got this is the Fast Core rulebook. It is done by myself and my longtime DM and friend Mark Tim. He worked on Rosloff Keep with me, and he has been a great friend of mine and a DM of mine since, you know, the Red Box. So we were probably 12 or 13, I was 7th or maybe 8th grade. We started playing together, and we have played ever since. We play a couple times a week still, even though we live 4,000 miles apart. So such is the way of life. But anyway, Mark came up with this with me. I called him up and I said, you know, let's try to put together all of our thoughts and stuff that we've done for years into an actual system. So we did that. And you can see here on the cover of it, you know, we're Art of the Genre here. I'm Art of the Genre. So I have been able to have a lot of relationships with artists over the years. So when I did this, I wanted it to look new, obviously, but I really wanted to use some old school artists as well in it. So when I came up with this fast design, this was actually one of the layouts. I think it was worked on initially by Jeff Lobenstein, but then my designer Andrew might have done this as well. But nevertheless, the top left here is Daniel Horn, who did some great covers like Saving the Best for Last and stuff like that for Dragon Magazine. And I've gotten to work with Daniel several times, and I've seen his studio out in Philly, and he's a fantastic guy. I was really, really pleased to get this piece. I wanted to use it. The middle is Todd Lockwood, who's a great friend of mine. We used to go to San Diego Comic-Con together until he stopped, and he did this great picture here. And then the bottom is Keith Parkinson, who his estate actually gave this to me, his son and his widow. And this is a piece that he had done for a book, The Stainless Steel Rat, I think. And I was very happy to have Keith in it because he's such a great old school person. So that and also represents our 3 themes in the back of the book, which of course are the magic oriented 1920s, standard fantasy, and then science fiction. So we'll scroll up here. On the screen, you can see the table of contents. One of the first things, somebody reviewed this already this morning. It had been out like 12 hours, and somebody already had it on a review. One of the first things they noticed, and I noticed it too as soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm going to put out the PDF anyway. And that is, it says Fast Core copyright 22022. It should really be 2022, but that'll be changed for the print version and any later stuff that we have. But I just wanted to get it out to people, so that's kind of funny that was the first thing that was seen. And it comes up so huge on this screen. But nevertheless, these are our chapters. And the first thing is going to be characters and character creations and such like that. So we'll go through that. I've got a little intro here where I talk about why I designed the system, and then we go into creating a character. And one of the first things you'll see here in one of the first couple pages is a quick character creation primer. You probably won't use this too much once you get used to the system, but just for an ad lib, something you kind of look at initially, you're going to be able to just kind of roll through an easy way to develop the characters. This is everything that's basically going to take to fill out the character sheet. So that's kind of fun, and it, you know, it just makes things easier. It goes through attributes, and there's a couple ways that we can do that. It'll go through later as well. And there's archetype, race, skills, fated traits, and calculate CCV. CCV is your magic. And that's explained here, of course, but it's not up front like this. Then you've got calculate physical saving throws, calculate mental saving throws, calculate your fated points, calculate defensive threshold, wound threshold, and maximum movement. So that'll just give you the basic primer on that. And then from there, you're looking at your character archetypes. There are 3 archetypes. You can see them kind of up here in the picture. That's combat, academic, and social. And they will take you through basically, any kind of class that you kind of want to make in the book. Your next page, it takes you through exactly what is going to be, exactly what you get when you're creating the character. That's a primary. You get 1 primary skill, 1 or 2 secondary skills. Then you get an extra secondary skill that's has to be dedicated to a combat. It doesn't mean that you can't take a primary in combat as well. It just means every character has the ability to fight in some way, even if it's rudimentary. That way the game doesn't break. You don't have somebody that can't do anything in combat. So that's why we put that in there. And it also gives you a skill that can be used for hobbies, and that just kind of rounds out the character and giving them a little bit of personality, and it allows you to select that yourself. There's nothing in the book that has like various hobbies. Those are just things that you can come up with on your own. And then your archetype starts with basically 100 gold, 100 credits, or $100 or whatever it is, depending on whatever setting you want to put them in. So then you go to the combat archetype. The combat archetype, one of the first things you're going to see in the bold here, up in this area, you're going to find it's got something called a plus 0.5 remainder to all combat and primary skills. One of the things on the review that was initially done is that they didn't know exactly what that was yet when they were looking at character creations. They didn't know how that affected things, but the remainders, it's basically like plus 0.5 to whatever skill you have. So if you took a primary skill, it would add 0.5 to that. And then if you had other things that added another 0.5, that would take it up a full point. So basically it just says the combat archetypes are a little bit better in combat primary and secondary skills. There's plus 5 remainder to defensive threshold. That again is a plus 0.5 to your ability to not get hit. That's the defensive threshold. And then wound threshold, which is later in the book, is once you get hit, if you actually get damaged. And then your remainder of attack penalty is for wearing armor is minus 0.5, which means basically you can anytime you wear armor, it gives you a negative to attack. Like a light armor gives you negative 0.5, but if you're a combat, you wipe that out. So basically it allows a combat to not have a penalty unless they're wearing heavy armor, and even that is going to be mitigated. And then it talks to you a little bit as well down here below about your CCV. And combat archetypes are not going to be something that are going to be built to have magic points. They get their CCV divided by 4 when they start. And the CCV is based on your mental attribute. So if your mental attribute, is 6 and it's divided by 4, that's going to be 1 point something. And since everything's rounded down, it'd be 1. So you'd start out with 1 magic point basically, which is very minimal. If you had 8 and it's divided by 4, you'd start with 2. So if you ever get 8 in something, you would start with 2 CCV as a combat archetype, which means like a ranger or a paladin or something like that who's more heavy in combat could still have a little bit of magic and use that if they chose to have the casting skill, and that would be your paladin type character or something like that. And then as they go up in level, they still gain 1 CCV at 3rd and 1 at 7th. So if they had an 8 for some reason in mental, they could have 4 magic points or 4 CCV by the time that they are 7th level, which is significant. You could cast basically 3 light spells or something light. Not light like I'm hitting you with I'm like brightening the room, but light like light healing or something like that, or even up to a heavy healing spell. or something like that, if they had the casting and they knew it. So academic, we're basically kind of looking at the same thing. This is plus 0.5 remainder to all primary and secondary skills, period. That means anything that they study, they're just a little bit better in. Plus 2 to their character casting value, that's CCV. So they start with an extra 2, and their mental attribute, which is your CCV, is divided by nothing. So if they start with an 8 mental attribute, then they have 8 CCV. Plus 2 for being an academic, they would start with 10 CCV. And then if they were like an elf, they got a plus 1, they could start with 11 CCV. So you start as that's a pretty good amount of magic to start out with, since spells in this game, light level spells, would only cost 1 to cast. So you basically could cast 11 light level spells without any penalty. Then social archetypes, which you can see on this next page, they get plus 5 remainder to all non-combat primary and secondary. So they're still very good at what they do. They're just not known to be combat oriented, so they get bonuses to that. And probably the biggest thing that they start with is an extra fated trait. And a fated trait in this game is going to be something like a it's basically like a feat. It adds something to your character, and so having a second one to start out with in any category is a big deal. So that's what the social kind of get extra. Then we go to character attributes and stats, and the attribute stats, and how you determine how you're going to roll them. This is kind of interesting. This is something that we did. We allowed you to roll it. That's take 3d10 and roll those, and then whatever you get, right? So if you roll a 5, 7, and a 1, those would be your attributes. However, one thing that I noted, if you get the scores that are too low in your mind, a lot of times I have like this kind of intricate, if your scores don't add up to this, or if they're all less than 5, you can do a reroll or something like that. So what I ended up getting on playtesting this was people would throw away any character that had low scores, and then all the scores, all of a sudden, you just keep rolling until you got 7, 8, 9 or 10, 9, 8, and that broke the system kind of down too. So it depends on what your players are like. You can still do that. You can still roll naturally. One of the things you can do also with the natural rolls is if you roll a 7, 8 or 7, 8, 3, you could take 2 off the 8 and make it a 6, and then add 2 to the 3, making it a 5, so you'd be at a 6, 5, 7. So you can kind of mitigate those or mess with them as you like. But one of the things that I found probably worked better is just to take a standard 5s across the board and then give the player 3 points to put anywhere. That way, if they want to take one of those 5s to an 8 and be exceptional in that stat, they could. Otherwise, they're just going to be in the mean. So they wouldn't have any of these special attribute modifiers or anything like that. But they could drop one of those 5s a couple points and take that 8 to a 10, or take the other 5 to a 7 and be 8, 7, 3. So that kind of mitigated it and showed you, exactly how it went down, and that's how you create the characters. And then you've got attribute modifiers table. This table shows you what modifiers you will get for having those attributes. The physical attribute, as you can see on this next page, it is going to add to those certain aspects of physical skills, and your defensive threshold. Your mental attribute is going to add to mental skills. Your resilience attribute is going to add to your saving throws. And then at the end of the day, you have something called an experience remainder. And that way your attributes can go up and your skills can go up. The experience remainders, when you're talking about doing a character attribute, if you have those attributes and you roll them and you come up with whatever your base attributes are, let's say, whereas for the sake of saying, we'll take that 8, 7, 3. And then you roll 3 more d10. These are going to be randomly rolled as well, and you can assign them as a remainder. And if they came up 5, 5, 6, then you could assign them as a remainder to each of those skills. So it would be 8 with a remainder of 5, 7 with a remainder of 6, and 3 with a remainder of 5. Okay, and I'll show you the sheet here. I should be able to bring it up. So we'll take it as this. This is one of my characters that I was recently playing. I created it on 8/11/2012, which is true, but I created it in a different game system for that. But so I translated it to fast. Nevertheless, so this character, Jade, her skills are physical 7, mental 5, resilience 7. And then you can see over here, you've got your remainders. She's got a remainder of 5 in her physical, remainder 7 in her mental, and a flat remainder in her resilience, which means when I rolled my resilience, I rolled a 10 on that remainder roll, and a 10 translates to a full 1. So that means she started with a 6, but because I rolled a 10 here, this went to a 7, and then that is 0 remainder. And then the mental, if I go up in a level and I get an attribute bonus, which you can when you go up levels, certain levels, I could, if I wanted to, I could add another D10, which is what you get to roll for attributes going up. And if I rolled a 3 or better, that would take my mental to a flat, and take this up to a 6. But that's if I rolled a 3. If I rolled a 4, it would take my remainder to 1 because it would be 11. 10 of those go to make this a 6, and then I'd still have 1. Same here, if I rolled a 5 or better, I'm going to have a remainder, and I'm going to take my physical up to 8. So, as you can see here, you've got bonuses. Her bonuses are going to add 0.5 to different skills, plus 0.5, and then her mental is just straight. So in that standpoint, she doesn't get any full bonuses, but because she is combat, she would start the game with certain skills, and those skills would then be mitigated by having an extra bonus to them, and I'll show you those when we get to skills. But currently, we'll go back here to this to the main document and start continuing through that. And we go to something called a naked attribute roll. If you have to make a naked attribute roll, it just means you don't have the skill in it, and that skill is going to be, so whatever your skill is, it's -5. So if you have a 5, you need a 1. If you have a 8, you would need a 3. If you have a 9 or a 10, you would still need a 3, because a naked attribute roll is always capped at 3, which means it can never be better than just a hobby. It can never be a secondary skill or never a primary skill, because you'll see on the other page that primary skills start at 6 and secondary skills start at 4. Hobby skills start at 3. So in that standpoint, your success rate is going to be based around those. So a skill that is a 6, you have a 6 in 10, because everything in this system is based on D10s of making the skill successfully. If I had stealth at 6, I had no negative modifiers for any reason, I would need to roll a 6 or less on a D10, and I successfully do that skill. Same with a weapon. If I had a gun and my skill was 6 in the gun, I need a 6 or less to hit the target without any other contributing modifiers. Easy enough. And then there's setting skills that I kind of put in, because skills are blocked. There are only 20 of them in the game. They have they cover a lot of area, but it also means that you're also limited in skills. You only get two secondaries and 1 primary. That means that you might not have the ability to drive or use computers or stuff like that. Well, for a setting, you're considered to be able to do all those things functionally. It doesn't mean you could race a car. It doesn't mean you could hack a computer, but you could do all those things. Use a smartphone, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And then skill caps. Skills are capped for primary at 9 and 7 for a secondary skill. Skills and character benchmarks. You're considered an apprentice until you hit 3rd, and then you're an expert, and then at 7th, you're a master. Those are in levels. And that also means that at 3rd, you can get a new set of fated traits to choose from. At 7th, you can get a new set of fated traits to choose from. And also, when using spells, at 3rd level, you can use medium level spells, and at 7th level, you can use heavy level spells. So then you just go through basic skills, and we'll take I'm not going to start with advanced academics because it's kind of one of those odd skills, but we'll go to casting is one of those two. How about criminal skills right beneath it? So criminal skills, it says the pursuit of skills and trades within a legal sphere of influence. Okay, there'll be picking pockets, locks, finding traps, removing traps, boosting cars, escape artistry, palming, forgery, street knowledge, drugs, prostitution, etc. Also skills considered to be gambling or cheating at card games, and those kind of things. People have asked me, well, do I have to choose what within that skill category I want to do? So maybe I choose criminal skills and I want to do picking locks. No. You do not choose. The only reason those subcategories are there is to tell you what the overall criminal skill category does, which means if you take it, it's basically like taking a thief pack, right? Where I can do everything within the thief sphere to some degree. So that is what criminal will do for you. Same with driving, will allow you to drive any of those ground vehicles, from a semi to a Vespa. To an APC or a tank, doesn't matter. And computer skills allows you to program, hack, video game play, security systems, cyber systems, all those things. So that's what these skills cover. Casting, you can see up there, is the one that spellcasters will use, or psionics. They both go off of casting depending on what setting you're in, or if you want to use psionics or regular spells. So casting is something that you'll want to take if you are a casting type character, or if you're trying to build out a character like a bard, or a ranger, a paladin, something like that you want them to have the kind of stuff that you might have seen in another game like AD&D. You want them to have a little bit of casting ability. You could take casting as a secondary. Where like a wizard or a druid or a cleric or something like that would probably take casting at a primary, because they're going to try to get that as close to 9 as they possibly can. So there you have it. And then one of the things over here you can see on this opposite page, this is influence. Influence, intimidation, persuasion, gather info, bluff, seduction, con, negotiation, that's the kind of stuff it covers. And this is one of those unique abilities that in the game will have a opposed test. So typically, if you're trying to do a skill, like healing, if you had healing at 4, you would need a 4 or less on a D10 to successfully do healing, because you're not it's not an opposed test, you're just trying to heal the wound. For something that could be opposed, like influence or stealth or something like that, you're actually going to do the opposite. Which I know can get a little confusing, but it was really the best way to mitigate it, because I'm working within a sphere of 1 to 10. So this way I was able to kind of reverse it, which means you take your skill, if the skill is 6, then you roll a d10 and add that 6 to the roll plus your level, and then compare that to the other person's opposed roll. So then you're looking at a high point instead of a low point. That's how opposed rolls go in the game of Fast. So we'll go through all, then the rest of them are just skills. There are 20 of them in there, and they cover most things, and if there's something that's specific that you know of that you would rather have, then one of those things, you could always take it as a hobby, or the game master could always just write it in as another skill. And just, skills are not assigned to any particular archetype, so just write it in as a skill. It's there. And here's hobby skills that we talked about here, and those, again, you just make those up. I have guys that collect coins, and one guy's drinking and stuff like that. So you just put that in, and it gives them it just kind of rounds out your character. Fated traits are something that all characters get. They are something that makes you special compared to any of the just normal fodder people. And they are denoted to, they're bound to a archetype, which means combat is for the combat archetype, academic is for the academic archetype, social is for the social archetype, and then there is a general category. General can be selected by anybody at any time. So even if your archetype says, or even if you go up in level and it says, archetype only, general is always available. So that way you don't get completely stuck in your archetype if you don't want to. There are times during the course of going up in gameplay or being a social that you can choose from any category, which means a social could actually start off with martial arts, which is in the combat category, because they get any to start out with. But anyway, we'll go here. This initial piece here, this is dodge. This is +5 remainder to your defensive threshold. So, if you remember from the beginning, a combat archetype got +0.5 to your defensive threshold, and this, if you take dodge, there's another 0.5, so your defensive threshold would have then, starting off, gone up a full point. It also takes your wound threshold up by 1, and we'll go through wound thresholds here in a bit. But that's what these things add to. Everything in black is exactly what they're doing. You can master weapons, the academics. They have arcane resistance, which is basically, you can you're better resisting magic. Mental fortitude, psionics, you can resist that. Firebrand of faith. This is a big one for clerics. It allows you to turn dead. One of the things you can do in your campaign too, if you're running it and you're like, well, I want a cleric, I want to actually have clerics, you could just say anybody who's a cleric automatically gets Firebrand of Faith. There's nothing in the game that says you couldn't start a specific class out with a skill if you wanted to give that in your setting. So keep that in mind. If you don't want the person to have to purchase it with their initial starting package, you could just say, I'm going to make you a cleric of, whatever god, Ra, and I'm going to give you Firebrand of Faith. And you could obviously do that. Skill study is kind of a catch-all, allows you to have a character to pick another secondary skill, which can be important in the game. And then you go to third levels. These are, you can only pick when you're third level or higher. That would be Well of Power, which gives you extra CCV. Elementalist, which allows you to put elemental effects to different spells. Because everything in the game, spell-wise, is raw power. But with Elementalists, they can actually make that raw power fire or electricity and actually have an effect to it. And then at 7th level, you could get something like Skilled Surgeon if you're a great healer, or Archmagi, High Priest, which adds 4 to your CCV. So that gives you a lot of CCV. Like by the time you get up there, you could have up to 20 as an academic in CCV. That's a big mojo. Then in the general social, of course, you've got somebody was mentioning, is this a game for kids? Is this kid friendly? Because they see some of the archetype artwork. Yes, it is. Those pieces by Saldana Ross are a little racy, I guess, but nothing over the top. And then the only other things, not really, I guess, you would consider kid friendly would be in the social category. You have erotic arts. Which just allows you to, a therapist or something like that. Or, yes, you could be, a prostitute or something like that could have erotic arts. So that's the one catch-all that might make the game a little if you didn't want to have that in there. But otherwise, everything else is very PC. And then the general, you have slick, quick, investigator, noble, tough, just kind of catch-alls that allow people, if they didn't want to keep having to take stuff out of the social category because they didn't want followers or something like that, they could be a noble, or they could be tough or hardened or titans of industry or stuff like that. So that takes you through how to do that. I'm going to show you again. We're going to go to primary and secondary skills here. So in this category, her primary skill is combat ranged, which means she can use guns, and she starts with 7 in that, which I think she's first level. She's first level, which means she's already gotten to roll because you start at 0. But you see she's got a remainder here of 9, so she's almost ready to go up to 8. The next time I go up a level and I get a roll on attributes, she's going to 8 because you're automatically going to get a 1 on a D10. Then over here, she's at stealth as her secondary she took. That started at 4. She's at 9. Now remember, because she's combat, she doesn't get any bonuses to those. Other than this combat melee. It's melee weapons, she's now at 5.7. So she has that 0.5, kind of helped that out a little bit and took it a little higher. She watches anime and manga. And then her other, that was just her hobby. This is this combat melee is the 3 or the extra secondary that everybody gets in combat. She just decided to also take combat as her only primary that she chose. So she's actually good at melee and ranged. And then her 2 secondary skills she took would be stealth and awareness. And both of those are currently at 4. Now those cap at 7. All these cap at 7, and this caps at 9. And then her fated trait she took martial arts, but because I'm playing in Black Lagoon, I use the advanced setting in the game, and it allows me to choose a actual real earth martial arts. So I chose Japanese Aikido, which is +2 to her grapple tests, and those are opposed tests as well. And then when she went up to first level, she got another fated trait in any category, so she took quick, which is +2 to her initiative roll. And initiative in the game is rolled with 1d10, and then you add your physical bonus into it, so 0.5 would be nothing. You need a full point to actually add something up. But now she gets +2 to the initiative on that, so she's a little faster than everyone else. So that takes you through that part of the character sheet, and then her defensive threshold here, we kind of talked about it. Defensive threshold is everyone gets 1, unless you're a fodder folk or something like that, just an NPC character that gets wiped out. They start with 1, and then they add in their physical modifier, so she would have been at 1.5, and then she got 0.5 for being combat, so that took that to 2, so she's at a full 2. This number here, defensive threshold in combat, is what you use on defense. So if somebody has a ranged combat of 7, she has a defensive threshold of 2, that 7 would be a 5, which means they need a 5 or less to hit her. So that shows you how defensive threshold works. Wound threshold, however, this is calculated by adding all of your stats together and dividing by 3, giving her a 6. And wound threshold is what it takes to actually hurt you. So I have to roll a 7, I have to go above it, a 7 or more on whatever dice are being used. In the game, combat is determined by light combat, which is 1 dice, medium combat, 2 dice, or heavy combat, 3 dice. Everything in the game is a d10, so you know those are d10. So on 1d10, if I was using a knife or a fist or something at her, they would have to roll a 7 or better to hurt her. However, if they're using a long sword, which is 2d10, they would still have to roll a 7 or better if they have a better chance to do so. As you can see, her CCV is 1 because she is a combat. She has 11 fated points, meaning she's been on 1 adventure and got 1 extra point. Fated points are kind of cool, which means anytime something happens in the game that could kill you or you don't like, you can say, I would like to use my fated points, please. Then you roll a d10, subtract that d10 from this number. And whatever, and if you successfully do so, you can avoid that. So let's say I get hit by a heavy weapon that does 3d10 and would kill me. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to say I'm going to use my fated points. She rolls a d10, she rolls a 9. That's less than this. So she successfully does it, but it means whatever is left over is how many fated points you have left. So if she rolled a 9, that would be 10, 11. So she'd be down to 2 fated points, which means the next time that she wanted to, if that guy hit her again with another 3 dice that would kill her, she'd need to roll a 1 or a 2 on her fated point roll, or it still happens and she gets hit. So these do go away, but you can build them. Every time you go on an adventure, you at least get 1. You can get 2 or 3 for, if you want to, for better role playing or stuff like that. Anyway, that's what those are. And then up here are wounds. Every character that's fated has 3 wounds to start the game with. But as you go up in levels, you can get more by taking fated traits, which give you more, or as a combat archetype, you get more. And so you can get, the max you can ever have is 10. I don't think I've ever seen anybody with 10. Only monsters like dragons and stuff might have 10. Nevertheless, that's what those are. So that's the wounds that we're looking at there. Okay? And then we can go back to the game system. And roll it up here. So there's the attack wound calculator. To take your first wound, it's your wound threshold +1. Hers was a 6, so she needs a 7. Every other wound after that is your base wound threshold, which means you add 6 every other time. So the first wound she takes at 7. The next one she would take at 13, because that's 7 plus 6. The next one would be at 19. That's wound threshold plus 12 because it's 2 more wounds. So 19 points to her, which can be achieved on 2d10 if you roll well enough. Could do 3 wounds to her, which means it would put her in the I'm at 3 wounds category. If she takes that 4th wound, she is out of it. So that'll show you how it does. And then you go to basic builds on different typical like race builds. So a dwarf in this one gets plus 0.5 remainder to their melee skill. They're a little bit better with melee weapons. Plus 1 to their wound threshold. They're tough, so it's harder to hurt them. Subtract 0.5 remainder from armor negatives, which means they're good at wearing armor. So they're basically like a little fighter type. A woodland elf is plus 5 remainder to range skill. They're a little bit better than that, but they get a bonus secondary skill of survival. So just little stuff like that happens when you're looking at the different characters. And I did some for beautiful aliens or tough aliens if you're playing a science fiction. And then the last part of this is languages. Languages are they're just allowed. Whatever you want in the game, you can basically have if you've got a backstory behind it. If you really wanted to do something with languages, you could always have it based on, you could do your mental attribute, divided by 4 or divided by 2, depending on your category or something like that. The kind of game system you wanted to be in, if you had to have like an absolute rule on how many languages you could have. But I just, again, in Fast, I don't really care. Just if the person makes sense, then they would have it. You automatically get the language where you're from, and that is that. So that is basic character creation. I'm going to put this sheet up here again, and we'll kind of go through it. I've just got base equipment. She's got a couple things. Uotech Holosight, Uotech Magnifier, which gives her -1 on each to her range modifiers, which means at long range for her weapon, the Steer Aug, which would normally be -2 to her attack, that's canceled. And then on her pistol, her M1006, she has some hollow points, which are +2 to its overall damage, which is pretty nasty, honestly. So her Steer Aug, that's 2d10 because it's a medium weapon. Her max to hit with it is a 7. And then her Smith & Wesson Model 1006, medium as well. Big handgun, it's 2d10 as well, but it's got those hollow points, so it's +2 damage. It's a 7 to hit as well. She currently wears no armor. That's why her DT is just 2. If she had like a flak vest or something, that would add 1 to both her armor, or both her DT and her wound threshold. So DT and wound threshold, it would add those up there, but it would take a negative attack penalty, which would actually be only 0.5. Because she's combat, it could cancel it. So she could actually wear a flak vest without any problem whatsoever, take her defensive threshold to 3 and her wound threshold to 7, which would be nice, but in this setting, it's hot, it's in Southeast Asia, she's not going to be wearing that. So she just goes as she goes. Our mental save is the average, or it's actually divided by 2. It's your mental attribute and your resilience. And then divided by 2 is 6. And then her physical save is her physical attribute and resilience, which is 6 as well. And if her resilience ever goes up, because I think it's at 7 right now, if it ever goes to an 8, she'll have a +1 bonus, which will actually +1 to all saving throws. So it should actually take those up by 1. Again, they max at 9, just like everything else. And then you've got maximum movement. The movement is based on your physical attribute. Now remember, physical attribute in the game, a lot of people say, well, physical attribute, you're huge. No, it just means that you're physically adept. So you can be very dexterous and thin with a physical attribute of 10. Or you could be a hulking brute with a physical of 10. Doesn't really matter. It's kind of an all-encompassing thing, so don't look at it in that standpoint as the bigger you are, the more physical you have. It can still be quickness. So, but the physical attribute it's physical attribute times 5, which for her is 35. And then half of that is your max movement to hit, which you can see down here is 17.5. So she could move 17.5 feet and still get an attack that round. In Fast, you only get 1 attack ever per round. Nobody gets multiples unless you have something called an area effect attack, like a rope or something like that with multiple things like that. Or there's a faded trait called whirlwind attack, so you could have area effect within 5 feet of you. Otherwise, everyone only gets one attack. It doesn't matter what weapon you're using. But she could move up to 17.5 feet and still get that an attack. Or she could move up to her full movement of 35 feet and not get an attack that round. And that's the character sheet. Very, very simple stuff here. And it should take you through exactly how to make that character and go through the first chapter of the fast system. And then the next one of these I'll do on combat. But nevertheless, hopefully I've answered questions. I didn't get anything in the chat, probably because it's my first live stream. Hopefully it's actually live. But nevertheless, that is Fast Chapter 1. I think I've hit everything through it. And, hopefully I'll, see you on the next live stream if anybody picks this up. And if not, hopefully I've answered your questions on creating a character in Fast. And I think that's it. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. And again, I hope this worked. This is my first ever live stream. Yay! And as always, good gaming. I think I say great gaming.